There's a version of you that shows up every day, gets things done, holds it together, high functioning as they call it. And there's another version, the one nobody sees, that has been quietly disappearing for years. If you've been trying to figure out why you feel that way when your life looks completely fine on paper, you're in the right place. Because the answer might be sitting in the one relationship most people will tell you to just accept. Your relationship with your mother. Hi, I'm Elle, the voice behind Childhood Decoded. I make these videos because I'm not just studying this, I'm living it. Turning my own experience of having a mother with narcissistic patterns into something I can finally understand has become part of my healing. And my hope is that it can support yours too. Today we're talking about how low contact and no contact with a narcissistic mother is often used as a form of self-protection, rather than being a dramatic overreaction. We'll look at the subtle patterns that slowly erode you, what the research says about how their behavior impacts their children, what stepping back can look like in practice, and why it's sometimes necessary in order to actually heal. First up, patterns that are hard to name. You probably didn't grow up with daily explosions. Nothing you could point to clearly and say, there it is. Instead, it sounded like, you're too sensitive. You always have an issue. Why do you always have to make a big deal out of everything? Psychologists call this emotional invalidation. Your feelings are denied, minimized, or reframed as a problem with you. The Counseling and Wellness Center of Pittsburgh has documented how this pattern feeds chronic shame, self-doubt, and the symptoms of complex trauma. And what makes this pattern so hard to name is that it's deniable. You can't always explain why you feel so eroded when nothing that bad seems to have happened. For me, it looked like bringing something painful to my mother and watching it get turned into a story about how I was dramatic, ungrateful, or attacking her. There was rarely a moment of, that sounds hard, tell me more. Just, I don't know what you're talking about. Or, you're making me look bad. From the outside, she was the devoted mother. On the inside, I was slowly learning that my feelings, my perception of events, my inner world, were wrong. A study published in Current Psychology, Luger-Schuster et al. 2023, found that when a parent's emotional life centers on themselves, their children are significantly more likely to develop anxiety, depression, and insecure attachment, and that one of the primary mechanisms was scapegoating. One child quietly becomes the designated problem so the parent doesn't have to look at themselves. Which brings us to the next pattern, being cast as the problem. That same pattern of being doubted often hardens into something more specific, a fixed role inside the family itself. Clinicians who study narcissistic family systems see this play out again and again. One child is often idealized while another is quietly assigned the role of scapegoat, the one who gets blamed for any conflict, tension, or problem that arises in the family. If that was you, you may have noticed that your mistakes were magnified and your achievements minimized. Siblings with objectively more chaotic behavior were somehow treated as more acceptable. And no matter what you actually did, the story about you never really changed. In my own family, my sister was expelled from high school, has a criminal record, went to prison for 5 years, and has never held a job for more than a couple of months. I, on the other hand, have multiple degrees, including a doctorate degree, which I graduated with a 4.0 GPA and was a teacher for over a decade. Yet, in the story my mother and sisters tell, I am the bad influence. I'm the problem. Make that make sense. That's what subtle scapegoating looks like. Reality gets so inverted that none of your actual choices register. You are still the one who needs to change. A 2023 study in Frontiers in Psychology found that children placed in these distorted roles are more likely to carry anxiety, depression, and low self-worth into adulthood. You grow up feeling fundamentally defective, even when your life on paper says otherwise. This is where it gets interesting because the damage doesn't stop at internal shame. There's often an external component, too. Clinicians have a name for what happens next: triangulation. Instead of dealing with you directly, A narcissistic parent talks about you, to siblings, to extended family, sometimes to your own children. Triangulation turns a two-person conflict into a group dynamic, where the parent pulls others in to validate their version of events. It might sound like, your sister thinks you're overreacting, or everyone agrees you're being too sensitive. Smear campaigns take that further. By the time you try to set any kind of limit, there's already a story in place about why you're the ungrateful one, the unstable one, the difficult one. In my case, my sister explicitly told me she didn't want me around her kids because I'm a bad influence. No specific incident or reason why, just a vague, corrosive narrative. And my mother and other sister did nothing to challenge it. Right, 2026, found that people targeted by smear campaigns often report chronic anxiety, difficulty sleeping, self-doubt, and withdrawal from social contact, the simple exhaustion of constantly defending your own character. So if you've been shrinking your life, staying small, avoiding being seen, that might not be just anxiety. It might be the logical outcome of years spent under a microscope that was always tilted against you. One of the most disorienting parts of this kind of upbringing is that your body often knows the truth long before your mind can accept it. A large study published in Psychosomatic Medicine, 2009, found that people who experienced higher levels of childhood traumatic stress were significantly more likely to be hospitalized with autoimmune conditions decades later. Combine that with research linking parental narcissism and emotional parentification to chronic anxiety, depression, and nervous system dysregulation, and the picture starts to come into focus. Like me, you might have gotten an autoimmune diagnosis that felt random. You might struggle with insomnia even though you're exhausted. Be plagued by deep imposter syndrome in your career, even with real achievements. Or you may withdraw from social contact and struggle with a persistent fear of being seen. All because your nervous system stays braced for the next criticism, hence the faceless channel. Growing up as the scapegoat teaches you that visibility is dangerous. Being seen means being attacked, misquoted, misunderstood. So you learn to survive by staying small, keeping your real self out of view. Your nervous system learned early that being visible leads to harm, and it adapted accordingly. At some point, staying small stops being enough to protect you, and that's when distance starts to look less like rejection and more like repair. Psychology Today's research on parent-child estrangement, 2019, found that going low contact or no contact is rarely impulsive. It typically follows years of trying, explaining your feelings, adjusting your behavior, minimizing contact, hoping that if you just say it the right way this time, something will finally shift. The decision to step back usually comes when a few things converge. The emotional invalidation doesn't change no matter what you do. The scapegoating intensifies when you try to stand up for yourself, and your body and mind start to show the wear. In my own journey, I'm currently in low contact. I've reached what I call radical acceptance. I've stopped begging my mother to care about me the way a mother should. I've stopped twisting myself into knots, trying to earn a version of love that was never actually on the table. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It does, a lot. I struggle with it every day, especially when I make these videos. There's real grief in accepting that the mother you need doesn't exist. But there's also a quiet, strange peace in no longer arguing with reality. From a nervous system perspective, reducing or eliminating contact with a chronically invalidating, scapegoating parent can decrease ongoing stress and give your mind and body space to recalibrate. It doesn't erase anything, but it can stop the constant re-injury. That's why I included no contact and low contact here as legitimate forms of self-protection. Real, valid, sometimes necessary protection. In many cases, including mine, complete no contact isn't possible. Cultural or religious expectations, immigration realities, financial ties, shared caregiving responsibilities. These are real constraints, not excuses. Psychology Today's research on estrangement, 2019, found that many adult children move in and out of low contact and no contact over time. It's less a single decision than an ongoing navigation. Low contact means you interact only when necessary, keep conversations brief and surface level, and keep your inner world out of the relationship entirely. This is called gray rocking. Functional contact means you stick to logistics, appointments, practical matters, and nothing personal gets shared. No contact means full disengagement. No calls, texts, or visits, usually after other approaches have been exhausted. None of these make you a bad daughter. They reflect your current reality, your need for safety, your values, and your capacity, and they can shift over time. Stepping back changes things, but maybe not in the way you'd expect. People often expect that distance will bring immediate peace. Sometimes it does. Your body relaxes. The tension in your chest softens. You sleep better. But you might also notice waves of guilt and second-guessing. Was it really that bad? You might feel a strange emotional numbness, like your feelings are finally on mute after years of being overwhelmed. And underneath both of those, often a hollow, aching grief for the mother you didn't have. But over time, most people report more access to peace than they've known before. Here's the thing. If what you feel is mostly relief with occasional spikes of doubt or grief, that may be your nervous system finally feeling safe. We covered a lot today: emotional invalidation, scapegoating, triangulation, smear campaigns, and the way your body carries what your mind has been trained to minimize. And we talked about why stepping back, whether through low contact or no contact, can be a form of self-protection. If you recognize yourself in any of this, you're not overreacting for noticing that your body is breaking down under the weight of dynamics nobody else seems to see. You are not cruel or ungrateful for needing distance from someone who repeatedly harms you, even if she gave you life. You are allowed to protect your nervous system, your health, your future relationships, even if your family or your culture calls that selfish. I'm literally walking this path with you, still hurting and ruminating. And I'm still learning what it means to accept that my mother doesn't love or care for me in the way I need. I posted a video on how I have a mother, but don't really have a mother, because that's how I truly feel. But now that I'm in low contact, I also feel more grounded, more honest, and more at peace than I ever did when I was fighting to be seen, heard, believed, and loved in my own family. If you want more help thinking through whether low contact or no contact might be part of your healing, I've created a free no contact guide based on both my personal experience and the research we covered today. You'll find it linked in the description. Tell me in the comments, have you experienced any of these behaviors? If so, how have they affected you? Have you gone low contact or no contact? And what was the hardest part of making your decision? Your responses help others in your shoes, myself included. So if this kind of research-based content helps you in any way, I would love for you to subscribe. I put out videos regularly, and if you think someone you know might need to hear this, please share this video. This is Elle from Childhood Decoded. I'll see you in the next one. And your body and mind start to show the wear, high functioning as they call it, or you may withdraw from social contact and struggle with a persistent fear of being seen. Psychology Today's research on estrangement